Hey guys, welcome to the studio. This is episode 7, and we are talking about owning your faith in this season of the podcast. I'm really excited today. I have my longtime friend, Pastor Mike Massaro. You know him, the man, the myth, the legend. I have known him by many nicknames. In college, we used to call you Mass.
That's true.
Which is a good one. Not like Catholic Mass, just Massaro.
Yep.
And when I think about Mike, I think about a number of things. One of them is sharing your faith. Like I've always considered you to be an evangelism guru. Also, when I think about you, I think about how long I've known you. And I think we've known each other for almost 20 years.
Almost 20, yeah.
Almost 20.
Yeah.
And I have this really vivid memory of when I went to go study at your house.
Oh, man.
And I was looking for food in your house. And all you had was Gushers.
Yeah. Fantastic.
That's all you had.
That's
not this big, but this is for you. I'm going to give you this 42 pouches.
Yes.
42 pouches
Dude,
of Gushers.
Now, listen, you're going to tap into this thing called self-control that I do not have when it comes to Gushers.
I was really just hoping for a reaction there. That's so good, man. But I think about Gushers, man, and very much like Gushers. Gushers are a lot like evangelism, really.
Yeah.
Not really. Okay.
You never know what you're going to get.
Is that how that works?
Maybe.
Anyways.
You never know what you're going to get.
Anyways. So today, the question we're talking about, real simple, how do you share your faith without being awkward? And since you're the least awkward person I know, that's why we're talking to you today.
I was going to say, I don't know about that. Sometimes I can be real awkward, like a squirrel.
Yeah, right. So, Mike, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about who you are and what do you do and where do you serve at Sugar Creek? And then we'll jump into the podcast.
Yeah, so just like Abe said, my name is Mike Massaro. I'm a pastor here at Sugar Creek. I serve as the Connect pastor at the Richmond-Rosenberg campus. So I have moved out of student ministry and now working with adults. And so with adult ministry, it's a little bit different. You know, they have money, unlike students, and but they still have the same problems. So
they do. Just
yes.
trying to get a date out there.
Yes.
You know, just trying to get a date.
Just trying to do that. So trying to help adults walk through marriages, parenting.
So what I want to kind of start with is, you know, that feeling I think a lot of people have had when, and maybe this is like a long time for you, but that feeling of like, I'm afraid to share my faith, right? And I think one of the core things about sharing your faith is that feeling of almost kind of like rejection can kind of be in there, or maybe you'll sound kind of pushy or weird or something like that. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. So exactly. So like, I'm gonna be real honest with you. So growing up as a teenager, we used to do like mall evangelism, and nobody wants to be that guy with the megaphone in the mall. Yeah. But like my student pastor will put us in the situation.
Turn or burn.
He'd be like, hey, you know, like go out there and just share your faith. And like you would have guys.
Zero training, by the way.
Yeah, zero. Like you're walking through the mall, Lakeside Mall. Remember that mall?
Before YouTube.
Yeah.
You couldn't look up how do I share my faith without being awkward.
But you do have guys who stand on street corners, especially like in New Orleans, you know, in the French
Quarter,
they'll be like, turn or burn, you're going to hell.
Sanctify or French fry.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but that's not the real way we do it.
Yeah.
And so like
that's a way.
Yeah. There's a better way to do that.
There's another way.
So
right.
I would say it definitely needs to be a little bit more personable and like, so, you know, it's got to be more authentic, in my opinion.
Right. It's got to be real.
Yep.
It's got to be real. I think that's really important. So, like, I think sometimes when people want to share their faith, they're, like, afraid of rejection. They're afraid they're not going to have all the answers.
Yep.
They're afraid of coming across as fake or offensive.
Yes.
Bottom line, they just feel like they're not equipped.
Yeah. So, like, I have felt that before, talking about like the fear of rejection, especially as a younger Christian, you can feel that, especially as students growing up. Like you can feel the, man, I don't want my friends to sit there and look at me like I'm weird or I have 3 heads. And, you know, but the reality is that we have an opportunity to actually point people to Jesus. And we can do that in our sphere of influence with those people. And so, and I think about so many times, some of us, we get into these evangelism little, I guess, we'll call them like cyclones, where we think like, oh my gosh, like I'm in this whirlwind, I don't know what to do. So then we
I've never been in that cyclone.
So I have before.
Okay.
So like it's this cyclone where you're like, I gotta have all the answers, and I gotta like, in your mind just starts going crazy. So you start memorizing scripts, and you start thinking like, how can I have this model and this model, and whatever model is best.
Right.
But it's not about being scripted. Okay. I'm reminded of the fact, like even in First Peter, it talks about the fact that like, but honor the Messiah as the Lord in your hearts. And so always be ready to give a defense, to those who ask about the hope that is in you.
Yeah, I think the key's there in that scripture is it just says be ready. Like, it doesn't say be perfect, have it all figured out, be the best evangelist, be the best at sharing your faith. It doesn't say anything about a rehearsed speech. It's really about being, I think, available.
Yes.
And also ready when the Lord calls on you to share your faith.
Yeah. So like a way that we can define that, like sharing your faith doesn't always mean preaching. And I think so many times we can preach at people.
Right.
We can sit there and just tell them like, hey, it's the turn or burn method.
Right.
But really, like you said earlier, it's telling your faith, like telling your story, just having a conversation. It's also even asking questions.
Right.
Like
ask me a question right now.
So what is your favorite French fry?
Right now, I'm going to have to go with Cane's French fries.
Ooh, those are good and salty.
Yeah.
I like those. Yep. See, so that's simple.
Yeah.
Hey, what do you
Pretty
believe
deep.
about God?
Wow, that was a jump.
See, we went French fries to God.
Yeah, there you go.
So, but like,
there's that sanctifier French fry again.
See,
we had a preaching professor who used to say sanctifier
it's
French
true.
fry. Yeah.
So, but all that being said, another way we can do that is you can invite someone to church. It's that simple. An invitation, or just even loving someone radically in the name of Jesus by serving them.
That's good, man. I mean, like sometimes I think people come to church and they think evangelism is about the presentation they see on Sundays. And, earlier in the season, I had this conversation with Xavier real briefly about how sometimes people come to church and they think they're getting fed, and they are getting fed. But really what they're doing is they're listening to someone else's work that they have done, hearing from God in the study. So almost like eating from someone else's like dinner plate that they prepared, right?
Yep.
And so that's a part of growing in your faith. You do need that. I would say if you really want to grow in your faith, start sharing your faith.
Yeah, that's good.
Like really, like that's when it I think skyrocketed for me is the first time I started just sharing my faith. And you know what? It's in a real similar sense. Like you just have to get used to being rejected.
Yeah.
It's kind of like if you say, hey, I like this person, and they're like, I don't like you, and you get rejected. Rejection's like a part of relationships. It's a part of growing up. It's a part of our culture.
It builds
No
you.
one likes to be rejected, but you got to learn how to deal with rejection. I would say probably, and this is just a guess, for every 100 times I've probably shared my faith, there might have only been like 10 green lights.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Sometimes a little bit more, but like you just almost like, all right, well, that person didn't accept the Lord. But it doesn't mean that they won't accept the Lord down the road. And so, yeah, man, I think the key in what you're saying is really your story matters.
It does.
Yeah.
And our stories do matter. And that's what I love. Like in scripture, it doesn't tell us like, hey, you've got to quote Torah, you got to quote, the Great Commission. You've got to have this long debate with someone.
You've got to know the Hebrew and the Greek. And
it's
the
literally
Aramaic,
a personalization of like, hey, let me share my experience with you about how I met God, and He's a personal God.
Right.
So,
like I would say, like there's a lot of different evangelism strategies, that are out there, and I think that if you really feel gifted in that space, then I would say get to know as many evangelism strategies as you can. But I kind of feel like there's a lot of things you can do, like you had mentioned earlier, like building relationships and asking spiritual questions. Keeping it conversational and knowing when to invite people into that conversation. 1 Corinthians 3:6 says, I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the growth.
Yes.
And so like for me, what I've discovered and had to get used to is that sometimes God has me like reaping a harvest. Sometimes God just has me planting seeds. And whatever season He has for me in terms of sharing my faith, I need to find contentment in that.
Yeah. And I think you hit on it too, is just the planting. Like, we're called to plant seeds. God's the one who does the growth. And man, the amount of pressure we put on ourselves to be the ones to, man, I got to grow. Like, I've got to be the one to see them come to faith.
Right.
The amount of pressure that comes off your shoulders when you go, like, I know, I'm just called to be obedient.
Right.
I'm called to be obedient and sharing what God has done in my life.
Yeah.
And God does the rest.
Yeah.
Wow, it's so freeing.
Yeah, I mean, like, there are times where God just sets up a situation, tees it up, man. And there are people, like, biblically speaking, that are spiritually gifted when it comes to sharing their faith. Like, we actually, there's a common friend we have, a guy named Josh Holland, who I think is spiritually gifted in this space. And, like, I can remember going to lunch with this guy, and just, like, he would look at someone and be like, "You need Jesus Christ, don't you? You want to accept the gospel?" And they'd be like, "Yeah, I do." And then right there, they give their life to the Lord. I'm like, it never works that way for me.
The day he moved onto seminary campus, he's got his moving box truck. He's unloading into the apartments. The dude's sharing his face with the moving company. Like, he's all right. Hey, bro, like, thank you so much. You know, my name's Josh Holland. You know, I got that deep Kentucky voice, know, and he's like sitting there going, "You ever heard about Jesus?" You know, and
dude,
just
it's unreal.
And the dude's like, "Oh my gosh, like, I need Jesus right now." And he's like praying to receive Jesus.
I mean, I would say, you know, to kind of close this out, like, what are, like, a couple of pro tips you would give to the audience, like predominantly middle schoolers, high schoolers, maybe some young adults? Like, what would you say, hey, these are my 2 pro tips about sharing your faith?
Okay. One pro tip was this: be real.
Right.
Like, be yourself.
Okay.
Like, don't sit there and try to imitate how somebody else shares their faith.
Right, that's good.
So that's a pro tip. Another thing would be this, is look at who God has placed around you.
That's good.
You know, I think the awkward moments come when we sit there and we feel emboldened and we're like, I'm going to go tell everybody about Jesus. Yeah. And then you're just running out and you don't have a plan.
Right.
So I would say that leads to my third one, is have a plan.
Right.
Like, I think the 3 circles is a good plan.
Yeah.
I think there's another method called, you know, your story, my story, his story.
Right. That's another good
Be
one.
familiar with your own story.
Right.
And so you can't go in blindly just going, hey, let me tell you about Jesus, and you have no plan.
Dude, like, I would say a couple pro tips. One simple one is, if you haven't already, write down your story.
Yes.
Right? Like, this is who I was before Jesus. This is who I was when I found Jesus. This is who I believe God is making me to be in light of finding my identity in Jesus Christ, right? Like, you got to write that down and just kind of know your story. And I want everyone to hear, like, your story matters. Like, no matter, like, some people think, oh, my story isn't cool because I wasn't, like, locked up at the age of 16 or something. Or, you know, my story isn't that great because, like, I grew up in the church. Like, no, that's actually a really amazing story. Like, you grew up in a church, like, and you had godly parents, and they tried their best to disciple you. And, like, that's an incredible testimony in itself, you know?
Yep.
And I would say that the other thing is, and this is just me, like, I've had to work really hard at that one. Like, I don't think evangelism is my spiritual gift. I think it's something else. So I've had to really learn from people who are better at it than me. And so, kind of back to your point, you got to get around other people who are sharing their faith. And here's the thing. Scripture's pretty clear about this. Like, we are all called to share our faith.
Yes.
And so part of you following Jesus is also leading with telling people your story. And so,
and I like what you said.
Yeah.
Is the fact that even though it's not your spiritual gift, it doesn't mean that you're not called to do it.
That's right, dude.
So, you know, the Lord gives people specific gifts, but we are to exercise all the gifts.
Right. Absolutely, man.
So.
Absolutely. Well, hey, we're so glad that you guys joined us today for episode 7. Up next, we've got some pretty cool people that are going to be discussing how to start a Bible study at your school. One of those people that's going to be on there is Lily Perry.
Let's go, Lily.
Who is such a cool person, man. She grew up in our ministry, an awesome leader, is off in college coming back, and is going to be helping out. And then the other person that's going to be with her is the one and the only Pastor Mason Law.
Ooh, Law Dog.
Y'all work together at Richmond Roseburg, right?
Yeah. Yes, I call him Law Dog.
Law, that's good, man. Law is such a great last name. Okay, my last name is Haley. It is a girl's first name, and I've had to come to deal with that. But Mason has a really good last name. So that's all I have to say. Thanks for joining us, guys. We'll see you next time.